Hello again, everybody. My name is John D. Healy. The podcast is called It's Good to Talk. People know me because I produced this book for my friends Tony McGurn. It's his life stories from 1941 up to a few years ago. You can buy it on Amazon. It's also on audio. I will warn you, it does have some adult content, so you may need to go to confessions after you read it. I'm also sponsored by Liffey Van Lines, moving company here in New York City. They'll soon be 50 years old, so a big birthday coming up soon. At the end of the podcast, you'll get my email if you have questions for the people today. Today is slightly different. It's more like a roundtable discussion. And Sergey has been on before. Sergey is a scientist here in New York City with Sloan Catering. Adam is a medical massage therapist here in New York City as well. And he has been on before. Today is slightly different because Adam and myself had the experience of seeing a UFO during our lifetime. And Sergey is, I guess, what we might call a UFO enthusiast. Does that describe
Yes.
you? Now, we'll start with you, Sergey, and you can introduce yourself, and Adam can introduce himself again.
First of all, the idea of possibility of extraterrestrial life has been boggled minds of scientists for a long time, and we know about the project where, for example, SETI for years trying to hear voices of universe through by listening some radio waves and some spectrum, whereas NASA looking into the space, looking into distant galaxies, trying to find some exosolar planets, whereas in Earth we observe some phenomena which is called as the UFO, unidentified flying objects, and it's a rare phenomena, but some people do observe it or have a lifetime chance to see this or very rare phenomenon. So that's why it's extremely interesting to see, to understand what they have observed. And is there explanation where we could fit into the definition of intelligent exhibitions or intelligent form of life? So that's why it's extremely interesting to understand, to look into the experience what some people who have observed UFO and how it looked like, what did they feel, and to see to understand their description, I would say.
A question for me or for Adam?
For both.
For both, okay. Well,
Yes.
I'll go first, Adam, if you don't mind, because mine is brief, I assume. So in 1974 was when I had my experience of seeing a UFO. So I was about 15 years old at the time. I was born in Ireland, living on the west coast of Ireland, close to the Atlantic Ocean. So the Atlantic Ocean was just a few miles away. And also, where I live is also a flight path for commercial airlines. So it wouldn't be rare to see Aer Lingus or Pan Am or whoever flying over. And they would be flying because if they're coming in or going out, they'd be maybe a few thousand feet up, okay? So you could see a 747 jet in the sky quite easily. But my experience in 1974, it was springtime, and I was on my own. I was cutting turf, which is peat. It's a form of fuel we use in Ireland for putting in the stove or putting in the fire. And it's been there forever and ever. Just giving a brief history on that. When you dig down deep enough, you hit to the gravel and you will discover usually what's known as bog oak. And the bog oak has been there since the Ice Age, okay? So there's a lot of interest in the whole aspect of peat, bogland itself. And there's thousands and thousands of acres. And what grows in it usually is like heather and rare growth. It's not very fertile in terms of land for sheep, for cattle, and that. So basically, we cut turf in it. So here I am as a young teenager on an evening at about 4:30 in the evening after school, and cutting turf is known as backbreaking. So you start at the top, you have to cut off one layer, and then you dig down and you dig down and dig down. And when you get to the bottom, the turf itself is almost like coal. It looks like coal, and it's set to harvest and dry, and you burn it in the fire for heat. So there I am at about 4:30 in the evening, all on my own. Beautiful evening, clear sky, clear everything. And in the distance, coming from the north distance, because I'm very good at my directional, north, south, east, and west. I see this object coming, say, like I'm in Mayo, so from Mayo, on a clear evening, you could almost see Donegal, which is way, way up north of the island of Ireland. So this object is coming, at an extremely high speed. No way was this like a 747 or anything like that whatsoever. And it was coming at such high speed, and it was a sphere-like shape. So hence, I guess whoever saw the first one called it a flying saucer. So it is in that thing. It also looked like it was, for want of a better description, maybe like stainless steel, very shiny. And it came within as close as less than 1,000 feet, because I'm familiar with heights, as I did a couple of parachute jumps, so I know 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, etc. So it came that close, and then it paused in a split second, and I fell back on my back, with just overwhelmed.
Because of surprise, or
right back on my back, and I was overwhelmed. And then I looked again, and it looked like that they were, I guess, maybe looking at me. I'm not sure about that part. And then it zoomed again to the northwest, which would be going towards the Atlantic Ocean. So the Atlantic Ocean from Ireland to USA is 3,300 miles. So when you're crossing the Atlantic, it's a long distance. It's, if you're going on a commercial flight, 6-7 hour flight usually, depending on weather and wind and turbulence. So that was my experience. And I'll tell you later about, I never told anybody because I was scared that I might be put away in a mental home or an asylum or a school for bold boys, okay? So that was my experience. But I'm not a bold boy.
Right. Did you hear any sounds?
That is a very good question. I can't remember hearing a sound, okay? It was more like a whiz, if you know, like a whiz. Like if you threw a frisbee in the air, right? If you throw a frisbee, you don't hear a sound, it just goes. And a frisbee is probably a good analogy as well. But I think what amazed me most was when it paused for, I don't know how long it paused for, because I was on the ground. But it seemed like not minutes, but maybe less than a minute. But then what was spectacular was the speed when it went to go northwest. That was like in an instant. And when it left where I was standing, or in that location, to go to the northwest, which would bring you to the tip of the Atlantic Ocean, that looked like it was only a few minutes. No way a commercial airline, for a commercial airline to even do that short distance would take maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe.
And did you see any unusual lights in the sun?
Unusual lights, that's another good question. I think because to me it looked like maybe that the sunshine of the evening was reflecting on it. I did say it looked like stainless steel, it wasn't like a painted color. It didn't look like Aer Lingus or Delta or anything like that. There was no logos, no advertising, nothing like that, because I'm into branding. So it was nothing like that. So it just went then at high speed.
I see. And when you came, and afterwards you didn't observe something similar only once in that place?
That was my only experience. And I know you talked to me briefly before, and you asked maybe was I abducted. I don't know. I don't recall that. And if they did, they put me back where they found me. I guess they didn't want me.
I see. I see.
You can switch to Adam now.
Okay.
But yeah, so what was the question?
Sergey wants to know your experience. What did you see?
Yes. What's your experience, Adam?
Oh, okay. Because I know I just wanted to. John asked me to talk about aliens, but you want to know what my experience was? So it's an interesting one because I can't say if it was while I was conscious or while I wasn't conscious, because how it ends making me think it was a dream, which is also the freaky part, right? But I think some of them can probably interface with us psychically. So my thing was I was actually living in East Harlem at the time, and that's where I was when I had this experience. But it was something where I just went to sleep with my window open, and I was on the top floor of an apartment. And then what happens is there's a certain point where I'm waking up and because the temperature feels different all of a sudden, it's like feels colder.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden that wakes me up, and I look around, and like I'm looking up because I sleep on my back. But then it's like the next thing I hear, but I don't hear it, but
Mm-hmm.
like I hear it, it's here, but it's not here, but it's here. Right? And it's like, oh shit, he's waking up in a sense. And it's just like, oh, you got to get him to sleep. And I look, and it's not like the Greys, the Zeta Reticuli aliens, but kind of similar, except instead of being short and gray, they have clothes, very nice clothes. They're taller and they're white, and they have like a thumb and then 3 fingers, but it's kind of longer and it's tubular at the end. Right? It looks like it's kind of concave at the very end, and maybe like 2/3 longer, like 1 2/3 longer than ours, right? And next thing I know is that it just goes over my head, like right over like the top of my head, and then next thing I'm out and I wake up in my bed, you know. And that was like really weird because my body was okay, and I don't know if I was physically taken away or if it was like connecting with me psychically or astrally or something like that.
Did you observe something on your body afterwards, like some spots or something unusual?
Completely normal, but it was made to feel like a dream. But the way I remember it was so real, it doesn't feel like a dream. It feels like memory, you know? And my body was totally okay. And that's where, like, because they're more advanced than us, I'm like, that doesn't necessarily mean it was physical. I was completely alone when like I had the experience, but I think waking up was an accident. And I was able to see them, and like I clearly remember them in that whole experience because I was shocked, and like I was almost like paralyzed, but it felt like I wasn't on a table, but rather maybe 3 feet above a table. And like it felt like I was all of a sudden doing this, and like my eyes were awake and my head was turning, but that's all I could move.
It's an interesting question that Sergey would ask you about, like, you know, any marks, right?
Right.
Because a friend of mine, years and years and years after, that I think maybe I shared the story with him over a few drinks, and he noticed, like, on my forehead, like a V shape. I don't know if I still have it, but I'll push up close. Maybe you can see, maybe you can't. But usually people have like horizontal frowns. I have like a V shape. Maybe when you meet me in person, you'll see it better. So it's like 2 lines that come down like this. And does it make me look different? I don't really care.
Is that where they put the antennas on you?
I guess they put antennas on me, yeah. And that then, like later, I didn't talk about this to anybody for years and years. And then I had the pleasure of meeting Betty Myler. She's an older woman she died only in 2010. And she set up the UFO Society of Ireland, right? And when I met her by accident at a radio studio promoting something else. But she was there to talk about what she does in recording sightings. And when I heard her, I went right to her, and she had like a ledger, and she wrote down everything from anybody who had experiences. And her ledger was pretty full, believe me, almost like the size of a phone book. A few things about Betty Myler that Adam will be interested in is that she studied physiotherapy. She also was a Reiki healer, and she also had a pilot's license. So she wasn't just some ordinary Irish housewife that just stays at home on the farm and cooks lunch for her husband. She was a very vibrant and active lady, and I only had the pleasure of meeting her that one time. But her stories are well documented. She's been on several radio stations and newspapers, and Boyle in County Roscommon, Boyle, is known as a path route for UFOs. Like it's their highway, it's their motorway. So there's a lot of sightings have been seen there. And she died 2010, unfortunately. But she left a great legacy, I think, for people to understand and be curious. And as I always say, your mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open, okay?
So here's the thing. I want to say something about that. Ireland is an island. It's right off the Atlantic Ocean, right? So one of the things that I've seen when I've studied this is that the U.S. Navy has put out footage in the last like few years, and one of the things that's kind of amazing is how these UFOs, they'll be able to go from air to space to underwater travel,
Correct.
right? And that's something that no country on this planet has technology for, and because of that, and because they're able to move seamlessly at like breakneck speeds, because of this, it also puts the possibility of they could be right under our noses in like underwater ocean bases, because they've already mastered like air, space, and water. Because water is like universal throughout this universe, so it's to know that they like travel off a place like Ireland is something interesting, because it's right off the ocean and it only just correlates with what the U.S. Navy has already put out there with their videos.
Interesting.
It's kind of interesting. Adam, have you thought about the idea to expand your experience by subjecting yourself to hypnosis?
Hypnosis? No,
Hypnosis, yes.
I haven't.
It's something could be interesting, because what I have read, some abductees, to expand their experience, they forget. You can subject yourself to suggestive hypnosis, basically.
Yeah. Well, that would also probably help me understand if it was a memory or if it was real. You know, or if it,
Right.
if it was a dream or if it was a memory.
Right.
Believe me, mine was real. I saw what I saw.
Yeah.
No dream for me.
Oh, and by the way, I know I explained their hands a lot, but in terms of how they look like the gray aliens, they were just taller, and they were white, and they had more features on their face, and the eyes were still bigger than ours, but smaller than like grays.
But did they have like a different type of sort of spacesuits?
No, it seemed like it was in a place to study, like a lab or something very sterile. And the leader was wearing robes, and the others were wearing like what I would believe would be uniforms.
But did they communicate with you in a way?
Yes, I saw them, but it was all telepathic.
Yeah, all telepathic. Okay, I see.
So, but you hear it clearly, though. You know, but no mouths are moving. Not at all.
Right. But did they say communicate something to you, like why they contact you near?
It was more like, oh, he's not supposed to be awake. He's waking up, and we got to get him back to sleep. And then it was like just that much, and then just putting me back to sleep. You know,
So,
me asking what's going on and all this other stuff. But yeah, it was just more like, oh, there's a mistake. Okay, now let's fix the mistake. And that was pretty much all I heard, but it was all telepathic.
So for my listeners, I want to say that my guest today, Adam Cardona, is medical massage therapist. Sergey Yaklichkin is a scientist here in New York City at Sloan Catering. The topic today is out of this world completely. We're talking about UFOs, because I experienced one, and Adam wants to occupy Mars, and Sergey is an enthusiast as well as a scientist. And that's something else that I find with people I meet that have an interest in UFOs and that is their curiosity, and they are generally curious people, and they have a lot of optimism. So I think the benefits I feel I got from witnessing UFO has given me a lot of self-confidence and a lot of curiosity as well. I'm not taken away from people that believe in God, but if I meet someone and if they say they saw God, then I'm more willing to accept the fact that God does exist. But does a UFO exist? Yes.
Right.
So one thing I just want to say that's kind of interesting, because you say I want to occupy Mars, but you know, I like this. I thought this piece of clothing was appropriate. But one of the things is, did you notice it says occupy Mars, even though we're not going to occupy something closer to the moon? And if you notice that NASA, when they got to the moon, like they you know, made a video and all that stuff, but then we never went back, right? Why have we not gone back to the moon? If the one side that has light is always facing us, there's a side that's away from us the entire time, where you could have like cities and all this other stuff. And like, were we told to like go away, that this is not our territory because why would even like from like government NASA to like private like Elon Musk, why would they all be skipping over the moon and going to Mars? It's just kind of curious. It's almost like, you know, before you go to the ocean, you had to land on the moon and do your observations before you safely, you know, occupy.
Right. Yes, it's a good question. I agree.
Yeah.
It's maybe because Mars, by physical characteristics, is closer to Earth, and it has atmosphere. It has potentially water. So if we assume that we are interested in colonizing Mars, in theory, it would be more suitable for colonization in a way.
Yeah.
I wish you could use a different word. I don't like colonization.
You know what that means? That means that the British are going to be the first ones over there, or at least they're going to try to be.
Yeah.
Right.
They've been everywhere else, yeah.
That's how come in these sci-fi things they speak English in space.
That's right.
England and America got to them first.
Well, we got them out of Ireland, almost. So anything else to add, Sergey and Adam, before we wrap it up? Or?
So did this experience, Adam, has inspired you for some other like research or learning more?
I do a ton of research. I mean, another time I could talk about it a bit more, but I've come to the understanding that not everyone's right, not everyone's wrong, but at the same time, I believe that there's multiple races of aliens out there, and some of them are in alliance with each other, and then others are not in alliance with each other. But I feel like we're just hairless monkeys compared to them. You know,
I see.
We believe we're
I think they're good neighbors, yeah.
More primitive. You know, so I feel like they want to avoid us, but they also want to guide our hands so we don't do anything stupid until we are more worthy of speaking to them. And I think that's why, you know, like I'll say one thing just to be kind of funny, but be kind of honest too. Afterwards, after, you know, I had that experience, I checked my anus to see if everything was okay.
All right.
They didn't explore me that way, so I was kind of safe. But you know, so yeah,
I think they're more interested in the brain, like what Sergey does in Sloan Kettering, like the brain cancer research. I found that when we had our podcast before, Sergey, about what you did with brain cancer, that was very, very interesting. You know, and people should look back at that podcast. They should look back at the one I did with Adam about the medical massage therapy as well. And speaking of which, for both of you, Sergey, how's your singing coming along on your guitar playing?
Oh, very good, very good.
I'm happy to hear that. Well, I hope you find what you're looking for.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Maybe at a different time we could talk about like research that like Sergey and I have done before.
That would be good. We can do that one. We'll give it a couple of weeks and we'll come back to that one.
Sure.
But it's good to talk. That's the name of the podcast. If anyone wants to look us up, my email, jhrenews, will be on the screen. And listeners, if you have questions, either for Adam or for Sergey or for myself or any of the podcast people I did, please email me the questions. And if you know anyone that has any interest in UFOs out there, or if they have some experience, I like to pick up maybe where Betty Myler left off and at least spread the word, because it's good to talk. And if we don't talk about things, we don't learn. And if we don't learn, then we're stupid.
I mean, I like to talk about aliens and stuff. It's kind of fun. But really, my whole thing is like healing and fixing the human body, and you know, that's more of my primary focus, because this is more a passion project, which I'm fine to talk about. I just want to make sure that people.
Oh, sure, totally, yeah. I mean, that's why I referenced Betty Myler, that she studied what you study as in physiotherapy and healing and Reiki healing and all that. So she was more than just a housewife, as I said previously. So she was a very interesting, intelligent lady, without a doubt, you know. Okay, so Adam, thank you for being on the show again. Sergey, thank you for being on the show again.
Thank you, John.
And you're always welcome back. And listeners, tune in, check all the podcasts out. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.